if I've been told I have an imbalance, where did that come from? Where, like, our clients coming in or people that we work with, where are they coming in self-identifying, or maybe somebody else has identified for them? What are some of the things that come up?
I mean, I think that's just like a very I can't think of the term, but someone trying to sell a product. That's a very big thing. I've even seen people comment in things online and stuff like, oh, I'm waiting to lift because I have imbalances that I need to fix. So there's people selling programs of like, fix your asymmetries, fix your imbalances. And so it's like this catch-all phrase that people see a lot. And so they're either self-identifying. And I've had someone DM me too saying my hips are imbalanced. What do I do about it? And, and I think it creates a lot of fear around movement. And it creates a lot of ignorance around anxiety for sure too. And I honestly, if I think about it, I've gone through that in the past where I'm kind of hyper aware of my movement. And so I've gone to where like, oh man, my right shoulder is stronger on this. So every time I pick up a weight, I'm going to make sure I pick it up with my left. Like I've been that kind of like anal retentive about it. I don't know, like I've been very specific about that in the past, and it's built anxiety and hindered my progress, hindered my performance in the gym. And so I think a lot of people see that and they get scared by either reading it online or some professional telling them. So I think that's where a lot of it's coming from.
I think some of the other places it comes from is well, I had this injury at some point, which
Oh, that's
yes, which created this thing for me for a while, and as a result of that thing, now I have an imbalance. And okay, so before we start getting into correcting whatever you think your imbalance is, we have to get back to the root of what was that injury in the first place. And can we identify like how that happened, what exactly happened, where were you at that time, and what have you done since then to get here? Because a lot of times I see this corrective exercise to correct imbalances as the culprit for why somebody is further down the path of having this quote unquote imbalance in the first place. To your point, like my hips are imbalanced. What does that even mean? How did we evaluate this? Objectively, what are we talking about?
I mean, some people do a static like Faber test on your hip. Like this one has more external rotation and more internal rotation.
Weird.
Which almost every person has a varying degree of internal and external rotation on their hips. Like almost everyone you're going to see has some degree of that.
And just because you have that, does that mean you're not going to perform well or going to get hurt or injured?
And you should not lift in a weight until you fix that.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, we're laughing about it. Like we've seen it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, depending on, I don't know, the injury, where you are in life, as far as age and exercise history and all that stuff, and then what your rehab process was like. If you had an acute injury, let's say an ACL, depending on how you rehab that, it could be, you might never have the symmetrical look at your quadriceps. Like they might not ever look the same. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't perform and that you can't ski, that you can't run, that you can't lift or you shouldn't lift weights. I mean, you can still have strength. It's finding the balance to be able to balance, have longevity and do the things that you want to do.
For sure.
Right. And so what ends up happening is then it gets complicated, right? It gets really complex. Like everything, Stephen and I were just talking about this. Everything turns into a single arm, single leg. It looks like circus tricks out there on the weight room floor to try and fix something that doesn't need to be fixed and probably isn't ever going to get fixed because it's not broken. That's the thing. Like you're not broken, right? Because you have an asymmetry or this imbalance. You are normal. So how do we work in your normal, right? So we're not saying that there aren't issues, right? Like and issues can't be created from having some type of a muscular or strength imbalance. But if it's not an issue and you're not doing things it's not an issue now, and your goals aren't such that you're forced into maybe like a training program or movement patterns where this could manifest into something different, then why are we worried about this? Why are we having this anxiety? Like why are we fearful, and why do we think we need to divorce ourselves from these basic foundational movement patterns, these basic things, these basic principles that we end up violating basically at the end because we don't have time or we don't have the bandwidth or we're just fearful that we have to do these other things first or for so long, where it has to be this huge part of our program. you still need to be squatting and
Yep.
hinging and pulling and pushing. And you need to do that with 2 fucking feet on the floor. You don't need to be on a BOSU, single arm, single leg, all this bullshit. There may be some value in that for you somewhere, but it's never going to be more than the foundational stuff.
And it should be a piece of the puzzle. It should be a part of the training. And I really want to go back to the point of a lot of these asymmetries, especially if we're looking from the lens, like we're kind of talking more about of like dysfunction. That term gets thrown around a lot as well, dysfunction. But let's say pain, it's managing is things. So it's not to say we've see a lot, and Cece and I have talked a lot about this with different clients of like, you can get out of pain a lot of times by finding a little bit more symmetry. And if we even think about symmetry, again, we go back to my example, my quad. I had an imbalance in my musculature on my quad, and that has made it where I do not have pain now because I have fixed that imbalance on left to left with different musculature. And, but it's managing, like I even think about that Cece had, we were talking about a client off air that she's had for a very long time. And I remember I've worked with this client before, and she always knows, she's like, okay, and just watch his right knee on when he does that squat because he shifts to this side. It's not that she's saying don't ever let him squat, but you don't want to let that asymmetry get carried away to where every time you're squatting, your butt's shooting out to the right side. You're managing these asymmetries, and that can keep you out of pain, but the ship is always moving forward. You're repairing the ship and you're managing it that you don't go off the cliff or whatever, but you're never stopping and completely, just getting off board, let's say.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. And to that point, that client we're talking about, how long have you been training that client?
Or are we talking about the one that's
The one we were just talking
going
about.
on like 19 years?
19 years, yeah.
19 years.
Yes.
Does that mean that everything that Cece's been doing is wrong because he still shifts?
No.
That's the thing. I know goddamn well she hasn't done it wrong.
Yeah.
That's how that dude functions.
Yes.
Like it is. Like I can tell him we can work. I could do all the single leg isolated band work, BOSU, Dynadisc, RX mat, RX pad bullshit that you want to do. And it's just not going to change. We may make some improvements, but he's still going to have that. And to your point, it's about knowing your client, knowing yourself, right? If it's yourself that you're applying this to, and understanding how to work through it so that you can continue to build strength, you continue to build muscle. And if you want to work the speed and power and the capacity pieces, you're doing all that stuff. But again, like after 18 years of this stuff and there's not another coach in here that I've worked with, quite frankly, that can work to the level of depth to potentially fix an imbalance or an asymmetry like Cece has.
Yep.
And that guy is still doing the same thing he was doing 18 years ago. And guess what? Plays golf every day the same.
An asymmetric sport.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yep.
Goes out and he plays golf 4 or 5 days a week, still does the same thing. He can still bend over and pick up his grandkids, right? At 70 years old, right? He can still go out and enjoy himself and be active, comes in here, gets a great workout and, stays healthy. Got great cholesterol numbers, right? His heart rate's good. Like, he's got all these things are going for him. And he shifts when he does a fucking squat.
Yeah.
Like again, at the end of the day, I just think people just get so lost in this. And I get it. Like at first you start with like the basics, right? And then the further you go, a lot of times in education, obviously the layers start getting peeled back and you dig a little deeper and you start to understand a little bit more and you start to think about how your clients or your patients or, your people on your team are functioning like, oh, maybe that's why.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a good place to go.
Yeah.
For sure. That's a great place to go. But at the end of the day, like how deep do we go here? Because we still have to do the thing.
It's a deep rabbit hole.
It's a very deep rabbit hole. And I think the word you mentioned is ignorance. And you can get ignorant the further along you get in your path because you've forgotten the basics somehow.